ShareBrunch, and it's just been a really fun experience.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Just a little comment here. So we were talking about, cross countries and stuff. We are in America, and this is an immigrant country, right? Everybody comes from everywhere. And usually, I've been talking a lot with homeless and this and that. And the immigrant people come here, and they're hard workers. They work so hard. They work so hard because we do not have that over back home. We don't have the opportunity. Both countries where I come from, women are, unfortunately, it used to be more, and it used to be worse. We are really less than the actual main community. So coming to this place and being able, it's going to talk later. Right? It's a present from God. It's a present from the heavens to be here and be able to be a successful woman. Sure.
Hello, good evening. My name is Shirin Hashim. I am an immigrant here. An expatriate, I may say. I'm originally from Saudi Arabia. And I ran away from home to be here when I was a teenager. And my life began starting in the fashion industry. And I came as a foreign student. So I was going to school. When I first came here, I've never had the notion of working, doing laundry, cooking, nothing, I remember my first roommate is showing me how to do that. And that's when I realized this is life. You work and you do everything. There is no home for that. So I started my life at the age of 19 here, working different jobs to put myself through school. I started off with a company that's called now Forever 21, which was Forever Fashions, doing their wholesale and first leasing to the first store. And then I moved on to become a buyer for another company. And after I graduated, I realized that I couldn't stay here because I was a foreign student, and then I went into having my own restaurant. I invested myself as a sponsor here, sponsored myself to be in this country. And then I moved on to the financial industry. I was a financial consultant for Wells Fargo. And then I have decided that my life was very comfortable in Los Angeles, and I wanted to make it uncomfortable. So I moved to San Francisco and finished my dissertation here. While living here, I worked for Restoration Hardware as a consultant. Currently, I'm a buyer for Gap, and I also have a company which is a 3-year-old company. It's called Fashion Community Week. It's called Community Events, but the big events that we do here in San Francisco is Fashion Community Week and Sustainable Fashion Week. Other than that, last few years I realized that I was so far from home, and how I'm so detached, and how I want all the women from where I come from to basically experience what I'm experiencing here. And that is to unveil their veil while they're inside the veil and actually become an entrepreneur, become an artist, become a traveler, and become just like every other woman in this world. So I started a program with emerging designers from Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Qatar, and other places around the vicinity, where everybody's welcome, obviously. We just last week did our first fashion show, and all the students were involved in creating it while I was directing it, sitting in San Francisco, and I flew out there for them to have 2 shows, one in Emirates and one in Saudi Arabia, and it was very successful. And the reason it was very successful was for me is because I got to see that women are playing a role that they did not play my mother's time, or while I was a child in my country. And it was just very wonderful, and it was also very inspiring to see that women are moving forward in our region, and it's just about time that they will be just like everybody else in the Western and the other parts of the world.
That's wonderful. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
So my name is Naila. work in the biotechnology field back in India. I had a great job in terms of I had a car, I had an apartment, but I was very
To be uncomfortable.
Oh,
You
pardon?
just wanted to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. But I would come home in the evening and I would just feel like my life was empty. And so I decided, actually I got laid off before. I was going to quit my job, but before I could quit, I got laid off. And I was looking into doing something creative, and the New York Film Academy had come to Mumbai, where I lived, to promote their course in filmmaking in New York. And so I flew to New York. I was lucky, I got a visa. Usually it's very hard for a single woman to get a visa from India to come here because they're afraid we'll marry the American guys, which is exactly actually. Yeah, and they'll ask you when you go for your visa, are you single or married? And I was just lucky that the guy who interviewed me at the US consulate was a nice guy and gave me the visa. So I came to New York, and it was an amazing experience living in New York and shooting films in New York, and I did actually meet an American and got married, so. And he's from San Francisco, so actually a San Francisco native, and so I moved to San Francisco, and he works in film as well, so we decided if both of us work in film, we won't really get to see each other because the hours are crazy. So I was also interested in non-profit work, and so I started my career here working at the Haight Ashbury Food Program. It was a homeless shelter in the Haight, and I worked in the job training program where we trained low-income people who wanted to become chefs, actually. Unfortunately, it's closed now, but it was, from biotechnology to film to non-profit, it was like, yes, the US is amazing, you can do anything you want, people give you a chance, and I just loved it. But I wanted to make a film, and 7 years ago, my husband and I actually visited an orphanage in India. I always wanted to adopt a child from India, and they told us how before the orphanage was built, they used to drown baby girls in the nearby lake. And even though I grew up in India, I wasn't aware how bad the situation was, because I was really lucky to be born into a family where my parents really valued daughters. But when this supervisor told us that, I told my husband, I have to do a documentary about this, because growing up in India, I wasn't aware of this. I went home and I saw the most staggering statistic when I researched on the computer, that 15 million girls have been killed in India in the last century. And that's, 50 million is huge. It's equal to more than the number of people killed in the First and Second World War. So that started my journey on making a documentary. So we would fly, luckily my husband was a filmmaker, so we fly back and forth to India. And I'm very excited to say that I completed the film this last month, and it's premiering next week in San Francisco at the San Francisco Documentary Film Festival. So I'd love for you guys to come to the festival and support me and then at the first festival, which is next Saturday, 14 girls from India will be attending the festival. They're daughters of sex workers in India, and this non-profit has actually taken these girls under their wing. So the girls have moved out of the red light area and are now, studying, and some of them are even going to be doing going to college here in the US. So they'll be attending the premiere of my film. So it'll be very positive impact to see, girls are in danger, but they're, when non-profits take them under their wings, they also can change their lives. And the other thing that I also started was a startup for international women in the US called the Expat Woman, and that's where I met the lovely Natalia and Shireen and a lot of the other international women, Christine. So we do events every month. Most of our events are focused on startups and entrepreneurship, because I found most international women here have a big entrepreneurial streak. Everyone wants to start a business. And in 2 days, we're actually doing our first pitch event. It's called Pitch to Sharks. We have a panel of investors, and we have 13 mostly international women pitching their startup to the family.
When is that?
It's on Thursday, May 28th.
Where?
It's at the Wix Lounge. And yes, and Natalia is going to be pitching her startup Live So that's the other thing I do, and I'd be happy to share more.
Thank you, Nina. So what's the name of the movie? Petals of Dust?
It's Petals in the Dust.
Petals in the Dust. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much. Amazing. Okay, so now I have a few more questions.
simple traits, if you say words, but to really follow it and keep it is what is the difficulty. First, integrity is very important because without integrity, nothing works. And then planning, communication, and punctuality. And these are the 4 steps that I think, that's important for me, but I think that if I were to mentor someone, these are the key areas that I would really ask them for first, and then the second step.
Thank you. No, that's beautiful, absolutely. And anybody else?
Yeah, I like that you said integrity because I do with artists, and they're, as you know, most of them are a bit crazy, and that's a great thing. They're never on time. So I lie to all of them about their deadlines. And I tell them the deadline is 2 weeks before the deadline. And by the time I actually have the deadline, sometimes I still don't have my paintings here. So just today I had a situation with an artist, and I said, you are as good as your word. And if you don't have your word, you don't have anything. And I've always believed in that. If I say I'm doing something, I am doing something, and I'll never let you down. But in this career that I've chosen is a very challenging one. Selling artwork and supporting artists is probably one of the most challenging things in the world. And I've had many, many days where I just really wanted to give up and, hey, let me get a regular job. And let me get a paycheck where I know it's coming. But I guess not giving up, as cheesy as that sounds, is the key to succeeding. My husband is a very known artist now, but he literally have been hungry in the past. I've never been hungry before. I've always had food. But he had literally starved so many times. He didn't have food, he didn't have any money, but he never gave up on being an artist because he really is one. We were in Maui 2 weeks ago before my big project, just kind of resting, and all he kept saying as we were on the beach, oh, I want to paint something. I'm like, no, you don't. He can't even help himself. We're in vacation, and all he thinks about is that he wants to paint. And I think you really need to be passionate about what you want to do. You have to believe. You just have to go for it.